As it turns out, the fence is perfectly aligned with the survey. Better luck next time.
Hey! What are you doing?
I bought my house for the silence. That's it. That's the only reason. I didn't care about the granite countertops. I didn't care about the school district. I didn't care about the resale value. I worked 60 hours a week in a high-pressure logistics job. All day long, people screamed at me. Phones rang. Drivers missed deadlines. My life was noise. So when I found this place, a small, two-bedroom craftsman at the end of a cul-de-sac, I knew it was the one. The backyard wasn't just a yard. It was a sanctuary. It backed up to a dense line of old oak trees. Beyond that was a creek. It was private. It was mine. For 3 years, it was perfect. I would come home, pour a glass of bourbon, sit on my back porch, and listen to the wind in the trees. I knew every inch of that yard. I knew where the sunlight hit the grass at 8 a.m. I knew where the hydrangeas grew best. I knew exactly where my property ended and the wild woods began. Then, the sold sign went up on the empty lot next door. I was nervous, but hopeful. Maybe it would be a nice family. Maybe an older couple who liked to garden. I was wrong. The buyer was a man named Richard. Richard was a lot. The first time I met him, he didn't walk over and shake my hand. He pulled up in a massive, lifted truck that was too wide for our driveway. He slammed the door. He was on his phone, yelling at someone about margins and incompetence. He built a house that didn't fit the neighborhood. It was huge, a modern, white box that looked like an Apple store dropped into a quiet forest. It went up fast. Cheap materials, flashy finish. I tried to be neighborly. When he moved in, I walked over with a bottle of wine. "Welcome to the neighborhood," I said. Richard looked at the wine like it was poison. He took it, barely made eye contact, and said, "Thanks. Hey, keep your trash cans on your side of the curb on pickup day. The truck scratched my rim last week." That was it. No thank you. No introduction. Just a demand. I went back to my house. I told myself to let it go. Some people are just stressed. I retreated to my backyard. At least I still had my privacy. 2 weeks later, I came home from work to find wooden stakes driven into the ground in my backyard. I stood there, blinking. They weren't just near the property line. They were inside it. I walked over to the old oak tree, the one I specifically loved because it anchored the corner of my lot. There was a stake driven into the ground 6 feet past the tree, on my side. A bright orange ribbon fluttered in the wind. My stomach dropped. I'm a details guy. I work in logistics. I don't guess, I measure. When I bought the house, I walked the property lines with the inspector. I saw the iron pins buried in the dirt. I knew exactly where the line was. These stakes were wrong. They were aggressively wrong. I looked up toward Richard's house. He was standing on his second-floor balcony, looking down at the yard. He was holding a blueprint. I waved. He didn't wave back. I walked inside and felt a cold knot in my chest. I knew what was coming. I've dealt with bullies in business before. They test the waters. They push a little bit to see if you push back. If you don't, they take everything. I went to my filing cabinet. I pulled out my closing documents. I found the plot map. I studied it. It was clear as day. My property line went straight back from the corner of the garage to the iron pin near the creek. The stakes Richard had placed cut a diagonal slice right through my yard. It would take about 10% of my land. It would take the oak tree. It would take the spot where I wanted to build a fire pit. I took a deep breath. "Don't get angry," I told myself. "Just talk to him. It's a mistake. It's just a contractor error." I walked outside. I crossed the lawn. I stood by the stakes. "Richard," I called out. He leaned over the railing. "Yeah. Hey, I think your survey guys got a little confused," I said, trying to keep my voice light and friendly. "These stakes are pretty far onto my property. The line is actually back there, by the creek bed." Richard laughed. It wasn't a nice laugh. It was a short, sharp bark of a laugh. "I don't hire confused people," Richard said. My guys use GPS. That's the line. I'm putting up a privacy fence. I need the space for my pool deck. I understand that, I said, my voice tightening. But you can't build on my land. I have a deed right here. Your deed is old, Richard said, dismissing me with a wave of his hand. My survey is new. Technology changes, buddy. That land is mine. Get used to it. He turned around and walked back into his house, sliding the glass door shut. I stood there in the grass, the orange ribbon flapping against my leg. The sun was going down, casting long shadows across the yard. The silence was gone. The war had started, and I was already losing. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the conversation in my head. Your deed is old. What does that even mean? Land doesn't move. Property lines don't drift like sand dunes. But doubt is a dangerous thing. Richard was rich. He was confident. He had a team of contractors. Was it possible I was wrong? Had I been mowing someone else's grass for 3 years? No, I refused to believe it. The next morning, the noise started at 7 a.m. The sound of heavy diesel engines shook my windows. I looked out. A massive flatbed truck was backing into Richard's driveway. It was loaded with lumber. Beautiful, expensive cedar planks. Pallets of concrete mix. This wasn't a little fence. This was a fortification. I dressed quickly and went outside. A foreman in a yellow vest was spraying orange paint on the grass, connecting the dots between the stakes. The line was now a solid neon scar cutting through my sanctuary. Excuse me. I shouted over the engine noise. The foreman looked up. He looked tired. Yeah. You can't dig here, I said, pointing to the line. This is a disputed property line. You need to stop until this is sorted out. The foreman spat on the ground. Look, man, I got a work order. I got a deposit. I got a client screaming at me to get this done by Friday. You got a problem, you take it up with him. I did take it up with him, I said. He ignored me. If you dig here, you are destroying my property. I will call the police. The foreman shrugged. Call them. Civil dispute. They won't do a thing. I've seen this 100 times. He turned his back on me and whistled to the bobcat operator. The machine roared to life. The metal bucket curled down and dug into the soft earth of my backyard. It felt like someone had punched me in the gut. They were tearing up the grass I had watered and fertilized. They were digging a trench right where I planned to plant my garden. I ran back inside. I called the non-emergency police line. Officer, I said, my voice shaking. My neighbor is trespassing. He is destroying my yard with heavy machinery. The dispatcher sounded bored. Is he threatening you physically? No. But, is he breaking into your home? No. His in the backyard, but his over the line. Sir, property line disputes are civil matters, she said, reciting the script I feared. We cannot stop construction based on your word against his. You need a lawyer. You need a court order. We can't send a car for this. She hung up. I looked out the window. The first post hole was already dug. They were pouring concrete. I grabbed my keys. I needed proof. I drove to the county courthouse. I spent 3 hours in the records room. I smelled like old paper and dust. I pulled the original plat maps from 1985. I pulled the survey from when Richard bought his lot. And there it was. I saw the discrepancy immediately. Richard's lot was shaped like a trapezoid. My lot was a rectangle. The survey he was using, if he even had one, must have assumed his lot line was straight. It wasn't. It angled away from my house. By straightening the line, he was stealing a triangle of land that was 6 feet wide at the back. I paid for certified copies. I drove home, armed with the truth. The construction crew was on lunch break. The fence posts were set in wet concrete. They stood like soldiers' graves in my yard. I marched up to Richard's front door. I didn't knock. I pounded. Richard opened the door. He was wearing a headset. He looked annoyed. I told you, he started. Look at this, I snapped, shoving the map in his face. This is the county record. This is the official map. Your fence is 6 feet onto my property. You need to tell them to stop. Now. Richard took the map. He glanced at it for maybe 3 seconds. He didn't study it. He didn't care. He handed it back to me. You obsessed, he said. It's 6 feet of dirt. Who cares? I'm increasing the property value of the whole neighborhood with this fence. You should be thanking me. Instead, you're acting like a petty little man. It's my land, I said through gritted teeth. Not anymore, Richard said. He stepped closer, invading my personal space. He smelled like expensive cologne and arrogance. Here's the reality. I have more money than you. I have better lawyers than you. If you sue me, I will drag it out for 5 years. I will bleed you dry. By the time you get a court date, that fence will have been there so long it'll be a historical landmark. He poked a finger into my chest. Go home, he whispered. Enjoy the view of my beautiful new fence. And stay out of my way. He slammed the door in my face. I stood there on his porch. I was trembling. Not from fear. From rage. Pure, cold rage. He thought he had won. He thought that because I was quiet, because I drove a Honda, because I followed the rules, that I was weak. He thought money was the only law that mattered. He was right about one thing. He did have more money than me, but he was wrong about the other thing. I wasn't petty. I was patient. I walked back to my house. I looked at the wet concrete. I looked at the cedar planks waiting to be nailed up. Okay, Richard, I said to the empty air. You want to play by the rules? Let's play. I went inside. I didn't call the police again. I didn't scream. I sat down at my computer. I began to research adverse possession and structure encroachment. And then I found it. The statute. The golden rule of property law in my state. A slow smile spread across my face. Richard wanted to build a fence. I was going to let him build the best damn fence money could buy. I was going to let him finish every single inch of it. Because according to the law I just found, once he finished it, the real fun would begin. The hardest thing I have ever done was wait. For the next 10 days, I lived in a construction zone. The air was filled with sawdust. The sound of nail guns echoed off the trees. I watched Richard walk around his backyard like a feudal lord inspecting his castle. He would point at a post, and the crew would jump to adjust it. He would run his hand along the cedar planks, admiring the grain. He saw me watching him once. I was drinking coffee in my kitchen, looking out the window. Richard caught my eye. He smirked. He actually raised his coffee mug in a mock toast. Cheers, loser, his face said. Thanks for the land. I didn't scowl. I didn't flip him off. I just sipped my coffee and turned away. Let him think he broke me. Let him think I rolled over. Because while Richard was building a fence, I was building a case. I didn't hire a lawyer first. I knew better. Lawyers are expensive ammunition, but they are useless without a gun. I needed the gun. I hired a registered professional land surveyor. I didn't pick the cheapest guy in the phone book. I found a company that specialized in high-conflict boundary disputes. I called them up and explained the situation. I don't just want the corners marked, I told the surveyor on the phone. I want a full topographic survey. I want every tree, every bush, and every inch of that new fence mapped relative to the deed. I want a document that is so accurate it would hold up in the Supreme Court. That's going to cost you, the surveyor said. Probably $1,200. I'll pay double if you can come out on a Saturday when my neighbor is away at his golf club, I said. They came on Saturday. It was a surgical operation. 2 guys in orange vests showed up with equipment that looked like it belonged on a Mars rover. They set up tripods. They used laser theodolites. They dug down at the corners of the property until they found the original iron rods buried 2 feet deep in the Georgia clay. The rods that had been placed there when the subdivision was built in 1975. They tied pink ribbons around the iron. They sprayed bright pink paint on the ground. Then they measured. I stood there, heart pounding, holding a clipboard. Well, I asked the lead surveyor, a guy named Mike who looked like he had seen it all. Mike looked at his data collector. He looked at the half-finished fence. He shook his head and let out a low whistle. Your neighbor has a problem, Mike said. How bad? It's not just the fence, Mike said, pointing to the concrete footings. See those? They are poured. That's a permanent structure. And the actual line runs right here. He walked 6 feet into what Richard thought was his yard. He sprayed a line of pink paint right across the fresh sod Richard had just laid down. The fence is 6 feet, 4 inches over the line at the widest point, Mike said. He effectively annexed about 400 square feet of your property. Can you put that in a certified report? I asked. I'll put it in a stamped, sealed, legal document, Mike said. With photos. I paid them. I shook their hands. I watched them drive away. That Monday, Richard's crew finished the fence. It was magnificent. I have to admit, it was a beautiful piece of craftsmanship. It was 8 feet tall, stained a deep mahogany. It had solar-powered lights on the post caps. It completely blocked my view of the woods, but it looked expensive. Richard threw a party that night to celebrate. I could hear the music. I could hear people laughing. I heard someone say, "Man, this yard is huge. You really lucked out with this lot." Yeah, I heard Richard say, his voice booming. Had to muscle the neighbor a bit to get the spacing right. But you know how it is. You gotta take what's yours. I sat in my dark living room, holding the sealed survey in my lap. You got to take what's yours. I waited 3 more days. I waited until I saw the landscaping truck leave. I waited until I saw Richard inspecting the finished product one last time, looking satisfied. I wanted to make sure every single dime had been spent. I wanted the check to clear. Then, I went to the lawyer. Her name was Sarah. She was sharp, mean, and expensive. I laid the survey on her desk. I laid the photos of the destruction on her desk. I laid a log of my interactions with Richard, including the date he poked me in the chest. Sarah looked through the file. She didn't smile. She just nodded. "This is textbook," she said. "He didn't just encroach. Because you warned him, and he proceeded anyway. This is malicious trespass. In our state, that opens him up to punitive damages." "I don't want his money," I said. "I want my land back, and I want him to hurt." Sarah looked up at me over her glasses. "Oh, he's going to hurt," she said. "Here's what we are going to do. We are not going to ask him to move it. We are going to demand he remove it. And we are going to give him a deadline that is impossibly short." She drafted the letter while I sat there. It was brutal. "Dear Mr. Richard, last name, we represent your neighbor regarding the illegal structure erected on his property. According to the attached certified survey, you are hereby ordered to remove the encroaching structure and restore the land to its original condition within 14 days. Failure to comply will result in a lawsuit seeking costs of removal, legal fees, and damages for diminished value and loss of use." "One more thing," Sarah said, typing a final paragraph. "I'm adding a clause about the trees. Did the crew cut any roots when they dug those post holes?" "They hacked through a bunch of them," I said. "Good," she said. "Tree law is terrifying. If that oak tree dies because of his fence, he owes you the replacement value of a 40-year-old oak. That's about $20,000 alone." She printed the letter. "Send it certified mail," she said. "Signature required. He has to sign for his own execution." I mailed the letter on a Thursday. I knew Richard would be home on Friday. I took the day off work. I didn't want to miss this. At 10:30 a.m., the mail carrier pulled up. I watched through the blinds. The carrier walked up to Richard's door with a green envelope. He rang the doorbell. Richard answered. He was wearing a bathrobe. He looked confused. He signed the little green card. He took the envelope. He closed the door. I sat on my couch and watched the clock. 1 minute. 2 minutes. 3 minutes. I imagined him opening it. I imagined him reading the letterhead. I imagined his eyes scanning down to the survey map attached to the back. 5 minutes passed. Suddenly, Richard's front door flew open. It hit the wall so hard I heard the thud from my house. Richard stormed out. He wasn't wearing shoes. He was still in his robe, clutching the papers in his fist. He looked at my house. His face wasn't smug anymore. It was a color I had never seen before, a mix of purple and gray. He marched across his lawn, right up to my front porch. He pounded on the door. "Open, UP!" he screamed. "Open the damn door." I stood up. I straightened my shirt. I walked to the door. I didn't open it. I just locked the deadbolt, loud enough for him to hear the click. Then I picked up my phone and started recording. The trap had snapped shut, and he was caught by the leg. Richard was screaming through the wood of my front door. "You think you're smart." Thud. "You think a piece of paper changes anything." Thud. "Come out here and face me like a man." I stood in the hallway, phone raised, recording every second of it. The audio picked up everything. The insults, the threats, the sound of his fist hammering against the oak. I wasn't scared anymore. Fear had been replaced by a cold, calculating resolve. I didn't answer him. I dialed 911. 911. What is your emergency? I have an erratic neighbor on my front porch trying to break down my door, I said, my voice calm. He is screaming and threatening me. I am in fear for my safety. Is he armed? I don't know. He's extremely aggressive. Officers are on the way. Richard was still yelling when the siren cut through the air. The moment he heard the wail of the police car entering the cul-de-sac, he stopped mid-sentence. He looked over his shoulder. He froze. I unlocked the door and stepped out just as two officers walked up the driveway. Richard immediately put his hands up, putting on his best misunderstood victim face. Officers, thank God, Richard said, breathless. This man, he's harassing me. He sent me threatening letters. I came over to talk peacefully, and he locked me out. The older officer looked at Richard. He was still in his bathrobe. He was sweating. He looked like a lunatic. Then the officer looked at me. I was dressed for work, holding a file folder. Is this true? The officer asked me. No, sir, I said. This man has built a structure on my property. My lawyer sent him a cease and desist and a removal order today. He came over here banging on my door, screaming threats. I have it on video if you'd like to see. Richard's face went pale. It's a civil matter, he shouted. You can't arrest me for a property line dispute. I'm not arresting you for a property line, the officer said, stepping closer to Richard. I'm detaining you for disturbing the peace and attempted entry. You need to step back to your own property. Now. Richard sputtered. He pointed a shaking finger at me. You'll hear from my lawyer. You're going to lose everything. Go home, sir, the officer barked. Richard retreated. He walked back across the lawn, across my lawn, trailing his bathrobe belt like a defeated boxer. The officer turned to me. Do you want to press charges? I thought about it. Not yet, I said. I just want a report on file. I need documentation of his aggression. The officer nodded. Smart. Get a camera for the porch. Keep your doors locked. That afternoon, the email war began. My lawyer, Sarah, called me at 4 p.m. I just got off the phone with Richard's attorney, she said. She sounded amused. He's trying to argue adverse possession. I laughed. He's been there 3 months. Adverse possession takes 20 years. Exactly, Sarah said. His lawyer knows it's a losing argument. He's just trying to scare you. They offered a settlement. What's the offer? They want to buy the strip of land. They offered $5,000. I looked out the window at the fence. It was still there, arrogant and imposing. $5,000. I said, the survey cost me $1,200. The lawyer fees are another $2,000. He's basically offering me $0 to permanently lose a chunk of my home. I told them no, Sarah said. I told them the land is not for sale at any price. I reminded them of the deadline. He has 13 days left to remove the structure. What happens if he doesn't? I asked. Then we proceed to phase 2, Sarah said. We file for a court order permitting self-help removal. Since we have the certified survey and he has no defense, a judge will sign it. It allows you to remove the encroachment yourself and bill him for the cost. The next 2 weeks were a standoff. Richard didn't take the fence down. In fact, he doubled down. He planted hedges along the fence, on my side. He installed a security camera pointing directly at my back door. He was digging in. He thought I was bluffing. He thought I wouldn't spend the money to take it down. He thought the deadline was just a suggestion. Day 14 arrived. I woke up early. The sun was shining on the cedar planks. It was a beautiful day for demolition. I called Sarah. Did they file an injunction? Nope, she said. Radio silence. They think you won't do it. Am I clear to proceed? You have the survey. You have a notice. You have the right to abate a nuisance on your own land. Just be careful. Do not damage anything that is actually on his side of the line. Not 1 inch. Understood. I didn't call a couple of guys with hammers. I called a professional excavation company. I met the crew in the driveway at 9 a.m. The owner, a guy named Big Mike, looked at the survey. He looked at the fence. You sure about this, boss? Big Mike asked. This is a nice fence. Shame to wreck it. It's on my land, I said. Take it down. All of it. Pull the footings. Stack the wood neatly on his side of the line. Do not cross the line. Big Mike grinned. You got it. He fired up the bobcat. The sound was distinct. It wasn't the sound of construction this time. It was the sound of destruction. Richard must have been home, but he didn't come out at first. Maybe he was in the shower. Maybe he was on a call. The first section of the fence came down with a sickening crack. The bobcat's claw grabbed the top rail and pulled. The 4x4 post snapped at the base. The cedar splintered. Crash! The first panel hit the ground. Then the back door of the white modern house flew open. Richard came running out. He was dressed in a suit this time. He was screaming. He was waving his arms. Stop! Stop it! What are you doing? He ran right up to the property line. Big Mike idled the engine. He looked at me. I walked over to the line. I didn't cross it. I stood exactly on the edge of the pink spray paint the surveyor had left. I'm removing the encroachment, I said, as per the legal notice you received 14 days ago. You can't do this. Richard yelled, his face turning that shade of purple again. That's my property. That's destruction of property. I'll sue you for every penny you have. It's not your property, I said calmly. It's trash on my land, and I'm cleaning it up. I signaled Big Mike. Keep going. Richard pulled out his phone. I'm calling the police. Go ahead, I said. I have a survey right here. While Richard screamed into his phone, the crew went back to work. It was methodical. It was brutal. Snap, crunch, thud. One by one, the beautiful cedar panels were ripped from the earth. The concrete footings, heavy jagged lumps of gray, were dragged out of the holes, leaving deep scars in the earth. The crew was careful. They stacked the broken wood in a pile right on the edge of Richard's driveway, a pile of expensive firewood. The police arrived 10 minutes later. It was the same officer from 2 weeks ago. He saw me. He saw Richard. He saw the bobcat. He sighed. Richard ran to the squad car. Arrest him. He's destroying my fence. The officer walked over to me. I handed him the survey and the letter from my attorney. Officer, I said, this structure was built on my land. He was given notice to remove it. He refused. I am exercising my right to remove an encroachment. The officer looked at the survey. He looked at the pink line on the ground. He looked at the fence posts, which were clearly 6 feet onto my side. He turned to Richard. Sir, the officer said, according to this survey, this fence is on his property. If it's on his property, it's his fence. He can do whatever he wants with it. Richard's jaw dropped. That survey is wrong. My guy said, then you need to take that up in court, the officer said. But right now, this is not a criminal matter. He is not breaking any laws. Richard looked at the pile of broken wood. He looked at the gaping holes in the ground. He looked at me. For the first time, I saw the arrogance vanish. It was replaced by shock. He realized that his money couldn't stop a bobcat. He realized that his bullying couldn't stop the law. I looked him dead in the eye. I told you, I said. I measure. The bobcat roared again. The last post was ripped out of the ground. The machine reversed, dragging the concrete anchor with it. The view of the woods opened up. The sunlight hit the grass where the fence had cast a shadow. My yard was back. But I wasn't done. I walked over to Big Mike. Send the invoice to my lawyer, I said loudly, so Richard could hear. We'll be adding it to the lawsuit. Richard stood there, surrounded by the wreckage of his ego. He didn't scream anymore. He just stayed at the ruin of his $15,000 project. The fence was gone, but the bill was just getting started. The silence that followed the demolition was different from the silence I had when I first bought the house. It wasn't just peaceful. It was heavy. It was the silence of a battlefield after the cannons stopped firing. Richard didn't come outside for 3 days. The pile of splintered cedar wood sat on the edge of his driveway like a monument to his stupidity. Eventually, a junk hauler came and took it away. I watched from my window. Richard didn't even come out to sign the invoice. He just cracked the door and slid a credit card through the gap. He was beaten, but he wasn't done. A week later, I was served. A process server knocked on my door at dinner time. He handed me a thick stack of papers. Richard, last name versus my name, civil suit for destruction of property, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and harassment. Damages sought, $50,000. I called Sarah immediately. He actually did it, I said. He's suing me. Sarah laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound. Of course he is. He's a narcissist. He can't accept that he lost. He thinks a judge will feel sorry for him because his pretty fence is broken. Send me the papers. The court date was set for 3 months later. Those 3 months were stressful. Even when you know you're right, being sued is a drain. It hangs over your head. You worry about the what ifs. What if the judge hates me? What if Richard's lawyer finds a loophole? But Sarah kept me grounded. We have the facts, she said. The law doesn't care about his feelings. It cares about the survey. The day of the hearing arrived. We sat in the small county courtroom. Richard was there with a lawyer who looked like he charged $500 an hour. Richard looked confident again. He was whispering to his attorney, pointing at me, smirking. The judge walked in. She was a stained woman in her 60s. She looked like she had zero patience for nonsense. Richard's lawyer went first. He put on a show. Your Honor, he said, pacing the floor. The defendant acted with malice. He didn't just remove a fence. He destroyed it violently. He humiliated my client. He destroyed $15,000 of custom work over a matter of inches. This was a vendetta, plain and simple. The judge listened. She didn't take notes. She just watched Richard. Then it was Sarah's turn. She didn't pace. She didn't use big words. She just walked up to the bench and handed the judge 3 things. The certified survey map, the letter of notice sent via certified mail, the receipt for the demolition crew. Your Honor, Sarah said. The plaintiff built a permanent structure on land he did not own. My client warned him verbally. He warned him in writing. He provided a grace period of 14 days. The plaintiff ignored all warnings. My client exercised his legal right to abate a nuisance on his own property. We are countersuing for the cost of the survey, the legal fees, the demolition costs, and... She paused for effect. Damages to the root system of a 40-year-old white oak tree. Richard's head snapped up. He hadn't expected the tree. The judge put on her glasses. She studied the map. She looked at the photos of the concrete footings dug into the roots. She looked at Richard. Mr. Plaintiff, the judge said. Her voice was quiet, but it filled the room. Did you build this fence? Richard stood up. Yes, Your Honor. But did you have a survey done before you built it? My contractor said. I didn't ask what your contractor said. The judge cut him off. Did you hire a licensed surveyor to mark the line? No, Richard admitted quietly. So you guessed, the judge said. You guessed, and you built on your neighbor's land. And when he told you to stop, you kept going. Is that correct? Richard stayed silent. And when he sent you a legal notice to remove it, you ignored it. I thought he was bluffing, Richard blurted out. The judge took off her glasses. She rubbed the bridge of her nose. Sir, she said, the law is not a poker game. You do not call a bluff on a property deed. You trespassed. You acted in bad faith. And you wasted this court's time with a frivolous lawsuit. She banged the gavel. Case dismissed with prejudice. The plaintiff's claims are denied. Richard slumped in his chair, but the judge wasn't finished. Now regarding the countersuit, she continued. I am finding for the defendant. She started listing the numbers. Survey cost, $1,200. Demolition cost, $4,500. Legal fees, $6,800. And the judge said, looking at the arborist report Sarah had submitted, the damage to the tree roots is significant. While the tree is not dead, its life expectancy has been reduced, and it requires treatment. I am awarding $8,000 for tree remediation. Total judgment against the plaintiff, $20,500. Payment due in 30 days. Richard turned white. He looked at his lawyer, who was busy packing his briefcase, clearly ready to get away from this disaster. I walked out of that courtroom feeling 10 pounds lighter. Richard walked out looking like a man who had just been mugged by reality. But the money wasn't the best part. The best part happened 2 weeks later. I was in my backyard. I had hired a landscaper to fix the mess the bobcat had made. We laid fresh sod. I bought 3 massive, beautiful hydrangea bushes to plant along the property line, my real property line. I was digging the holes when I saw a for sale sign being hammered into Richard's front lawn. I stopped digging. I walked to the front. Richard was coming out of his house with a box. He saw me. He stopped. He didn't yell. He didn't snay. He just looked tired. You leaving? I asked. Can't afford the mortgage anymore, Richard muttered. Not after the legal bills. And I have to pay you next week. I accept cashier's checks, I said. He glared at me one last time, then got in his truck and drove away. The house sat empty for 3 months. It was a wonderful, quiet 3 months. A new family bought it in the spring. A young couple with a golden retriever. The first day they moved in, I saw the husband walking the property line. He was holding a piece of paper. I walked over, a little nervous. Was it happening again? I said. I'm the neighbor. The guy smiled. He extended a hand. Hey, I'm Dave. Listen, the realtor told us about the history of the fence. Yeah, I said. It was a whole thing. Well, don't worry, Dave said. We aren't building anything. We love the open view of the woods. Actually, I was wondering if you'd mind if we planted some wildflowers on our side. I don't want to encroach on your roots. I smiled. I looked at the old oak tree, still standing tall, its roots healing under the soil. Plant whatever you want, Dave, I said. Just stay on your side of the line. He laughed. Deal. That evening, I sat on my back porch. I had my bourbon. I had my silence. The fireflies were starting to come out in the woods. I looked at the spot where the cedar fence had once stood. It was gone. The scar on the earth had healed over with new grass. The hydrangeas were blooming blue and purple. Richard was gone. His money was in my bank account, and my sanctuary was restored. Some people say you should love your neighbor. I say you should respect your neighbor. But if your neighbor tries to steal your land, you don't get mad. You get a surveyor, and you bury them.